Welcome, everyone. We are so happy that you're here. As we are letting people in, please feel free to familiarize yourself with Zoom. I know many of us live in Zoom, but there's always a new feature, new capabilities. Actually, I learned that you can actually rename yourself with and include your company. So try to do that. We'd like to know where you're coming from, representing yourself or your company, and also put in the chat where you're joining from. We'll get started in another minute. I would like to start by introducing my co-presenter, Carrie Keeling, who will be speaking in conversational style. And before we jump into tonight's topic, I would like to take a minute and thank our sponsors and share a little about the Customer Success Leadership Network that both Carrie and I are members of. We're happy to have the sponsorship from Strike Deck by Medallia and also a sponsorship from the Success League. They are here, and we are delightful that without their support, we would not have been able to bring tonight's program. Thank you to our sponsors. For those of you who don't know, the Customer Success Leadership Network is an industry group run by a governing council of senior customer success leaders and volunteers, and we create programs and content to advance the field of customer success and help to mentor and grow leadership in our community. There are a few members of governing council also here. I want to call them out. We hold monthly meetings for customer success executives and professionals all around the Bay Area. We used to do that in person before the COVID hit. And now we built a Slack community, and there are about 3,300 members on the Slack community. And if you're not a member, please, there's a link probably we made available to you. Feel free to join. And there are a lot of great conversations that happen over the Slack. So join the conversation. We'd love to hear your viewpoint and see you as a member, active member of the community. All of our events are recorded and will be available on our website. Also, we provide a link to the website, so you'll find other resources there, like blogs and other contents. So we have a lot of content to share with you, and it's obviously, all of it is free. And we'd like to ask you in return to share your thoughts and feedback. That's how we get better. Our mission is to elevate customer success and drive business growth for our companies and also develop our professional skills. I'm going to share my screen in a moment, and just by way of introduction, I'm Omid Razavi. I'm probably 10, 12 years practitioner in customer success. Prior to that, I was running services, professional services, combined services before the cloud, and for the past 10, 12 years in customer success. And together with me is Carrie Keeling. And I'll be interviewing for the first part of this talk. I'll be interviewing Carrie about her experience in customer success. She has an incredible background in CS. So without further ado, Carrie, would you say a little bit about yourself and your background?
Hi, thanks so much for having me, and it's great to be here with all of you. So I've been in the customer success world for probably 22 or so years. I got my start, if you can believe this, at Ford Motor Company. Way back when, in the late 80s and the early 90s, and we don't need to do the math on exactly how old I am or how long I've been around. But what was interesting is that how I got my start was Ford had discovered repeat business as helping their business to be incredibly profitable. And back then, they had a tagline that said that every Ford Motor Company customer was a lifetime value customer of $100,000 or more. And that was what they attributed to be the lifetime value of a customer. Obviously, in today's world, we can buy half a car for $100,000, depending on what kind of car we're going to get. But that's really where I got my start. And I did a lot of their commercials and some of their training videos around how to keep your customers coming back. And shortly thereafter, I moved into the telecom industry. This is when the internet first became a thing, and we were all dialing in on a 14.4 baud modem that screeched and made a whole lot of noise. Some people have no idea what that is, and others, we all just kind of go, yes, we remember those days.
Yeah, those are actually music to my ear. When I hear the connection, I made a connection. Yes.
So funny. And I got my start actually in tech. I got my start in network administration. And after about a year of network administration and becoming really fascinated with, just trying to understand how to get people from one side of the planet to the other, connecting with each other. I moved into, well, it wasn't really customer success, but really it was all about customer enablement. It was about how do we help an 80-year-old lady get online and check her email, right? And the reason why it was such a big deal back then to teach someone how to use the internet was because, first of all, that's one of the first, recurring revenue streams from tech, right? You think about SaaS today, and one of the reasons why SaaS is so important is because of the recurring revenue stream and how it helps a business grow. And so, back then, that was one of the first. Obviously, you've got cable and satellite television as well. And so it was about enablement and helping people so that they would continue to subscribe and they would continue to buy more, because back then you had to pay for your email, and you had to pay per email box. Moved into product management, and product management in these days was very different from product management in the software world. And basically I was responsible for the 4 P's of marketing. And that was pricing, position, promotion, and placement in the market. And I was compensated on growth and retention for the customers. And by this time, it was probably, I want to say it was 96 or 97. Fast forward to 2005, I moved into the software industry. That was my first software company was Human Concepts, was an HCM company. And that was when I really started doing customer success in an official capacity. I had CSMs, I had TSMs, I had tech support, I had basically the whole post-sale experience, and grew my career from there. I took a stint where I met Omid at Blue Nose Analytics. So I built customer success technology for a couple of years.
I do remember Blue Nose, Carrie. It was one of the first 3 pioneering customer success platforms together with Tango and Gainsight. So you were actually head of customer success or chief customer officer for that company in customer success. And what is remarkable based on the story that you said, you were familiar with concepts that we think is very new for SaaS, but even before SaaS or before software, when customer loyalty or lifetime value of the customer was so important in other industries, or enablement for users who are not tech savvy was so important. Or you mentioned you work for an ISV CLEC company that churn was a big problem. I do remember that we used to switch providers, and there were a lot of incumbents, and many of them used to go out of business because they were not able to retain customers. So all those concepts actually had existed, and you lived them, and sort of they were built up in you until you took on a role in a SaaS company and running customer success. So that's incredible. So how was the first? What was your first impressions of customer success for SaaS, working with those early generation clients?
Well, quite frankly, my first impression was that it wasn't different. So all of the things that I experimented with and I learned in the CLEC world, and then, all the way through from software, from enterprise class software through building, customer success technology. And I wasn't the chief customer officer. That was Catherine Blackmore. I was the VP of customer success. Even today, a lot of the principles back in the early 90s, they're not different. So, growth and retention and enablement and professional services and time to value, all of those things that are so important, even back in the early 90s, are not changed from today. The thing that's changing, I think that, just in general is there's this motion in the market right now to where a lot of the larger organizations are working to monetize their customer success motion. And then obviously the digital approach to customer success. So tech touch or servicing the long tail or digital customer success. It just depends on who you're talking to as to what they call it. I would say that those are really the two biggest changes over the last 20 some odd years.
Now let's move forward from Blue Nose. You actually followed or joined with Kathleen Blackmore at Oracle. Can you tell about that experience?
That was a lot of fun. Yes. So I worked with Catherine at Blue Nose. If you ever get the chance to hear her speak, she does a lot of thought leadership as well. She's a remarkable lady. And I just loved working with her, loved her vision. I learned so much by partnering with her to drive customer, value realization and success for our customers. Went over to Oracle to help do two things. One, get her team ready. So she had a team of, I want to say it was like 700, close to 1,000 global customer success managers from the SaaS business at Oracle. And they were preparing to monetize customer success. So they had to go through and do a lot of enablement with those team members to get them ready so that they could deliver what Oracle was defining as a premium level of services. And so did a lot of their early days of enablement, lots of training, lots of definitions around what success planning looks like, business reviews, what's the structure, what are the soft skills, what are the hard skills. And then I went in to run a book of business after we got the team ready and we kicked off and we started to sell the monetized approach to customer success as a premium service, as I mentioned. Moved into running a book of business for the HCM part of the sorry about that, I lost my train of thought, of Oracle's SaaS products.
Yes, I mean, what is incredible actually back in those days, there were not that many resources available, right? It was through the informal networks that we had, perhaps meetups here in the San Francisco Bay Area. I know other parts of the country, they had local meetups, and so you learn actually from people that you work with. And that's probably, as you are inspiration for a lot of customer success managers who are working for you. Also, you work with Catherine, who was also paving the way at the level that she was. So this is actually incredible that we actually nurtured our networks and we grew. And now we have just tremendous amount of resources available to us so that we can actually get up to speed on customer success, best practices, as fast as we can. How do you describe, if that was customer success 1.0 and then maybe there's a 2.0, and I know there are a lot of discussions, but how do you describe the progression in this field? Yeah,
I love that question, Omid. I see, it seems like there's a lot of people in the industry that have a lot of different opinions. So for what it's worth, this is how I view it. Customer Success 1.0 was really about learning how to build the customer success motion, right? How do you segment your customers? How do you determine your service delivery? What is a business review? Should you have them? What's the cadence? What about adoption? What is even churn? And a lot of organizations, even at Customer Success 1.0, you think about, that's way back in 2005, from 2005 to probably 12, I would say 2012-ish, 13, something to that effect. And that's where a lot of the organizations were just trying to figure out how do we prevent churn, which means we've got to do all these other things, proactive, right? Business reviews, adoption, that kind of onboarding. Let's make sure that our onboarding is really good. Tech support, make sure that tech support and customer success are totally aligned. Same thing with sales. And then you move into Customer Success 2.0, and that's really where I would say the industry started to reach a level of maturation to where we weren't all the way out of nascency, but I would say we're starting to get mature in our processes. How do we, customer segmentation became standard place. Customer, you started to see larger organizations that had thousands of CSMs thinking a little bit more about the cost to serve customers and how to mitigate some of those costs and those expenditures. And then you started to, for the smaller organizations, they were probably doing it better than anybody else because they were born in the cloud. Customer success was born, along with that organization. And they were like, you were starting to see even these small organizations be way more mature than even some of the larger organizations. And then I kind of feel like we're moving into this customer success 3.0. I think that the world is starting to realize that customer success is here to stay. We have to have it. It is absolutely critical to anybody that has a recurring revenue stream. And by the way, it doesn't always have to be about software or technology. You can look at companies like Stitch Fix as an example, and they do have a version of a CSM that in their own organization. So, you start to think about customer success and the value and in businesses and customers are starting to see what's why. But we also are starting to recognize that customer success, as a company gets bigger, customer success gets a little more expensive. And so I think that 3.0 is really about how do you drive success at scale. And that's where I think that a lot of the innovation comes in. That's where we're starting to see a lot of predictives, machine learning, AI driven approaches. This is where there's a lot of talk right now in the market around digital customer success or tech touch. And I think that that's really like the next thing that our industry is starting to see.
Yeah, I mean, if I paraphrase you, and we actually wordsmithed this definition of customer success as part of preparation for for our webinar. Really, customer success started by perhaps sales account management seeing that churn is happening. And it's out of ordinary, the numbers. So you hired a head of customer success, you go and just take care of these accounts. And it obviously was not a non-starter because it's not just one person or one team's effort to prevent churn. So we work sort of our way backward. The customers are churning because they're not getting the value, and not getting the value because they're not adopting and using the product. And then you go back in time and further in time and said, they were not properly onboarded. Even sometimes they were not sold the right products, or they did not fit the ideal customer profile. Right. So we went through that process of actually building the end-to-end customer journey. A lot of times now, everybody now agrees that customer success is about delivering success at every stage of customer journey. And then also you hinted on, I'd love to actually hear as you move forward to your current company, product has a big impact on the customer success. We know the product managers, many of them are also data driven. They collect data about the usage and adoption, and there is a synergy between customer success and product. And then the last thing that actually has come in is it's just not enough to deliver customer outcomes. And this is not about our outcome, which is renewal and expansion, but delivering customer business outcomes and making that happen through having a strong adoption, because customers, if not adopting, then they're not achieving the outcome. If they're adopting, what else they need to do in terms of change management and other things that they have to do to make sure they achieve the outcome. But also, we know that we are in an experience economy, especially with the COVID that happened. Customers' expectation of service has gone to a level that it has. So really, you have to deliver great experiences at every touch point with the customer. So yeah, if you could elaborate a little bit about how actually all these elements are coming together to define a modern customer success.
Yeah, I think, and that's such an important point. A lot of customers, we shouldn't expect customers to define, oh, I'm working with a support person. Oh, I'm working with a professional services person. This is my customer success manager. The onus shouldn't be put on our customers to try to define who they're working with when. It's really up to us to define that experience. And it does begin, I believe, with the product. Even though there's a litany of people that work with those customers, it does begin with the product, and delivering an awesome experience through every step of the customer journey is absolutely critical. Because that is where the value happens. And so, one of the things that we're working on at VMware, which I'm pretty excited about, is measuring all of the critical engagement points across the customer journey itself. So you can think about, when we've all seen customer journey maps, and we all know that customer journeys, really there's hundreds of different journeys. And then you've got your customers that fall out of the journey, and that in itself is its own journey. And you can really become fatigued with trying to map all of these what if scenarios. And when you think about that situation and how many journeys there are, to think about the most critical engagement points, which is in the market, you might hear them being called as the moments that matter. And that's really when you start to kind of think about, okay, what is the most important thing that our customers experience? They log into the product for the very first time and they see your UI for the very first time. They have trouble and they call support for the very first time. They receive, some kind of a review where somebody is sharing with them, or maybe even it's happening, it may be even happening automatically or programmatically, where they're learning about whether or not they're getting value from the product, right? Those are really critical engagement points. And so to be able to create an environment in which you're measuring that by collecting customer sentiment and then mapping it against your customers' operational metrics. So as an example, if you can imagine a customer's experience with time to value, and then you map that against your own metrics, let's say that your company puts together a goal that your time to value is going to be 15 days. A lot of businesses are very guilty of saying that that's my goal, because that is an inside out view. But it's really ideal if you can look at it from the outside in. How do we know that 15 days is the right number? Just because the SaaS vendor or the software company or the ISP or whomever decided that that was what they wanted. So if you can measure customer sentiment, you can then track and then measure it against your operational metrics to make sure, A, is 15 the right number? Maybe it's not. Maybe you're squishing your customers. Maybe you think it's 15, but maybe your customers can't move fast enough and it has to be 45 days, right? So to be able to take those measurements through sentiment and then operationalize and then look at it across your operation is critical, not just to improve the customer journey, but it's also going to help your businesses improve your operational swagger, if you will, right? It's going to help you to up your game, because you're going to know whether or not something is working, something is not working. And it can't just be about all the bad news, right? It can't just be about the negative sentiment. How do you know what you're doing really, really well that you should accelerate across other areas in your organization? So those are some of the things that we're working on today at VMware that I'm really excited about. Omid, is that what you were hoping to hear?
That's right. Yes, absolutely.
Great.
So let's just talk a little bit about the challenges of delivering customer success at scale. When you're fortunate, I work for a startup company before I worked for a large company. Obviously, the scale really makes a difference. Now at VMware, you have tens of thousands of customers, and typical approach to segmenting your customer base is based on some notion of spend or ACV or potential ACV. Or sometimes you can actually superimpose on it. If a customer actually paying for customer success services, then you provide the high touch. But basically you have a curve. The curve has a long tail, and then you have a certain percentage of your customers, typically less than 20%, maybe 5% that receiving high touch service because they are actually paying for most of your service. And then you have a low touch in the middle, and the rest actually the notion of tech touch. There are problems with this model, right? This is sort of a fixed mindset going in terms of the value that customer provides to us, as opposed to really understanding the customer. And what you pointed out, Carrie, was that there's probably a better way of looking at it, and basically answering these two questions. So we'd love to actually bring this up, that maybe there's a better way of segmentation where you could answer the question of which customers among your install base are going to generate the add-on growth, are going to expand with you. Probably the ones that are spending most with you, they bought all your product, they're pretty saturated, they're quite likely, and an expansion could happen from among any of these in the tens of thousands that are stretched. So which ones they are that you want to pay particular attention because of the signals that they're sending to you. And you mentioned, the signals could come from any channel. And it's not just, talking to the customer success manager anymore, especially in this case that you don't even have a customer success manager assigned to the account. So the signals can come from any channel. How would you actually recognize that signal and say this customer actually has a propensity to expand, to grow, to become your advocate, to have their story to be told? And the reverse of it is true. Which customers are interested in leaving or downsizing with you? How would you actually find out? What are the early signals that you look for so that they say this customer is in trouble, and for me, if I want to save them, these are the kind of playbooks that I need to follow? Anything would like to add to this? Sort of, we're debunking the traditional model, and we'd like to actually propose a new way of modeling the interaction of a customer and scoring them.
Yeah, and I think, and this is, so again, I think that through this lens, this is the traditional customer segmentation model, right? 80% of your revenue comes from the top 20% of your customers, and then, and then everything else is the long tail. And that customer segmentation is really important, because the reason why you use that segmentation is because it helps you to define your service model. How are you going to service these customers? Are you going to service them with people? What's the customer to CSM ratio? Are you going to, what does value realization look like? Are you going to do success plans? Are you going to have adoption guidance sessions? Are you going to produce best practices? Do you have an executive sponsorship program? So, your high touch model and this type of a customer segmentation approach is really, really important. However, I would argue that there's really two different types of segmentation models. One, the segmentation model that I just described, because you're going to have people, and you're going to have people that are going to service some of your customers. You may have customers that won't be serviced by people at all. And then you might have some little idiosyncrasies that happen in between, where, you might have from your mid touch to your low touch, you may have CSMs that provide one or two types of services, but nothing else, and everything else is digital. And I've seen a lot of different types of variables there. So I tell you that to tell you this. My recommendation would be, don't get married to the traditional segmentation model. Look at it both ways. Segment for your people, so you know what your services are that you're going to deliver, but also look at it through this other lens, which is you've got more segments than just that. You've got industries, you've got geolocations, you've got customers that are displaying certain behaviors. So Omid and I were talking about this the other day, and and I contend people, just human beings in general, we're horrible poker players. This is why, if you've ever watched people play poker, they do the hats and the glasses, and they put their like this, and they sit, and it's because everybody's there. We're bad at poker playing. So when you think about our customers show signs of getting ready to churn before they've even made the decision. You may see they slow down at logging in, or you may see that they stopped adopting a certain feature, and then that certain feature will get less and less and less, right, used, less frequently used. And you can start to kind of look at somebody's digital footprint and see signs of churn. And then I would look at that also. Those are segments, right? And then to the other side, how do you, the customers that are showing digitally signs of consuming more, how do you put your foot on the gas with those customers and get them out of your low touch segment and move them into your high touch segment, so that you can then continue to service them with people? So I would say that when you think about how customer segments, Have your service delivery. That's important. Segmenting your customers, like I said, that's really critical. But then thinking about the other types of segments. How else, what are the segments that are needed? You may find that there's a niche within your customers that are in a retail industry, right? That are just killing it with your product. And you may not even realize it until you start kind of looking through your customers' digital footprints with your own product set.
Yes, what I'm showing here, just to belabor this, let's say if you're actually segmenting the customer or to inform your decisions based on some notion of customer health that is derived from the customer happiness. We heard from CEO of Zoom, for example, that he really emphasizes happy customers. Now, if you have signals and from the customer to various interactions that you have with them, that they are unhappy, it is important that you reach out to them before they escalate or decide to leave, and you attempt to solve their issues proactively. On the other side also, if they're happy customers, you want to stay connected with them and energize them as your champions for advocacy and growth. So here, we came up with notion of dynamic segmentation, which means that, depending on various observations that you make from the customer data, you make decisions that that's going to be reflective of what customer actually, where they are in the journey and how they feel about it.
That's right.
Yeah, so moving right along, we know at the large companies, not large companies, but every company, technology, in customer success from the beginning, even today, even you're a large company, still you have the challenges of not having enough budget, enough resources, enough time. And you leverage technology as a force multiplier to overcome those challenges. Now, as your company scales and your team grow and mature, you have now a new set of challenges. And I'll submit to you, with the challenge actually comes with your expanding technology stack for different functions in your customer-facing organization. And unintentionally, you create silos amongst your organizations. And then really the question is, how to get to the truth about the customer? If I would like to, for example, at many of the technology companies, you have these set of functions. You have a customer success function. You have another team that is focused on customer experience. They do voice of the customer. You have obviously support organization that has probably the most interaction with the customer. You have professional services that they stand up, onboard the customer, they stand up the system, and they have a pretty good understanding of customer interactions and how they feel, how they're progressing, how they're meeting their time to value, as well as the education system, the content that you provide to them, and the feedback that the customer give about their product, as well as in-product, obviously, experience that's not shown here. We just took this slice of things. You also have customer advocacy tools and marketing on one side, and sales. All of these systems, proliferation of these systems, give you signals about how customer is feeling. Now, what is really important from the customer standpoint, outside in, that they kind of expect you to know what they think about to know about their interaction with the last interaction with support, if they had a great experience or a bad experience. But you do not know, because you are part of your own, if you will, we are part of our own data silo, because each of these systems, and especially if you acquire your company that has acquired other companies, you may have multiple CRMs or multiple even customer feedback systems. So really that silo becomes even more pronounced in a larger organization that even in a small company may not exist. Anything you would like to add, Carrie, to this?
Well, other than the fact that it's so true, and that's probably the Achilles heel of a truly, successful customer experience. To your point, customer data exists everywhere, and our customers generate a tremendous amount of data. They have social channels, they have, their usage data through you. They've got, depending on what kind of technology you have, they may or may not have telemetry data, their CRM information, and all of those sources, Omid, that you've just mentioned. And then, and to your point, our customers don't want to have to repeat themselves. So anytime they interact with someone, there is this notion of, well, shouldn't you know? And as a customer, I've found myself frustrated as well when you have to say the same thing over and over again. However, the challenge is that while our companies are remarkably technical because that's what we do, I think the industry has got some maturity left in it to kind of go through and create some way to democratize the data and aggregate it. So you'll see a lot of data hubs or you'll see like a Hadoop or a pool to where they'll point all of these different data sources so that when you're collecting the information, you can then use some way to visualize it. It could be a gain site, maybe it's a Salesforce, maybe it's Strike Deck, maybe it's something. I've actually seen people use Oracle platforms. There's a litany of tools out there that you can use, Tableau even. Some work, some don't. It just depends on kind of what your specific use case is. At the end of the day, the best advice I can give is don't let the tail wag the dog. Make sure that you choose your systems for visualization as well as, how you're going to aggregate your data together. Make sure that it's based on your use case, not some technology that you love just because you have a relationship or whatever. That's where a lot of organizations can run into some snags.
One thing I want to add, actually, that you mentioned to me in a one-on-one that at VMware you accomplished is that actually all these functions that you see here are under a single senior leader. I mean, you see a lot of companies actually they could be divided to different pillars in the organization. Having under, it's not necessarily, you can organize in any which we want, but it's really important to have alignment along all these organizations. When we have a single leader, the alignment is more achievable. I would think that then is spread between sales and engineering and support functions. What do you think?
I personally, that was why I chose to come to VMware. Outside of the systems, because the single leader that I work for is the customer experience and success. He's the chief. He's basically our version of a chief customer officer. And he doesn't own the data though, and he doesn't own the systems. Those are owned by other organizations. However, what's really interesting is that everything post-sale falls under him, so that the customer experience is really looked through a more holistic lens. So usually when you think about some of the businesses that you may be familiar with, or maybe even one of the businesses you're working for today, customer experience traditionally is owned by marketing. They do customer advocacy. They've got, maybe your customer cabs or, your strategic relationships with customers. They help white papers. They do a lot of market research, and they do NPS and any other surveys that isn't tech support or professional services. They usually own their own surveys. And then customer success can be owned by pretty much anybody. It can have a seat at the table and report directly to the CEO. It could be in services. It could be in sales. It could be, I've actually seen it in marketing before. It can be in a lot of different places. But what's kind of sad is that customer experience and customer success, because they're bifurcated in the business, they don't meet in the middle. And when you think about what they're supposed to be driving, customer experience and customer success, when you marry the two, in my opinion, it really delivers a best in breed approach to the customer. A lot of the transformation that VMware has been working on over the past, I want to say about 7 months, they've been really working hard to get this transformation going so that customer experience and customer success is merged. And I see personally, and for this particular stint in my career, I don't work directly with customers. I'm really more on the digital side. I've got the voice of the customer piece, and then I've also got the digital customer success piece in my remit. But what's interesting is that I'm already seeing, through looking at the NPS scores and through looking at a lot of our customer operational metrics, there's a lot of goodness to be had there, and it's working.
Yes, allow me to, this is awesome. I like to really get to the meat of what actually you're doing, which I think is incredible. As you know, the company has stood up the customer innovation and intelligence, reporting to the like CCO, and you're heading that group. And what you shared with me, I sort of try to create a pictorial of how this actually is put together, and I would like to get some discussion around the solution that you're building. We know back in the day when we had only a sales CRM and a service CRM, sales on the sales side, opportunities get open, worked on, closed. On the services, same thing, tickets get open and closed. But that was before customer experience became important. That was before the cloud solutions proliferated. Each of them brought in the value add that they did. So really what really has happened is that we have now a number of solutions that are there. Some of them are pre-sales, some, like for example, online community that you have both for pre-sales and post-sales. Customers can join the online community a lot of times, or provide feedback even before they become customers. But some other systems are dedicated to the post-sales journey. Sometimes you have multitude of these solutions. What you shared with me, and you could share a little bit more, Carrie, as part of your customer intelligence initiative, you're actually building a data lake. If I move all these solutions to the left and show the data lake in the pictorial, will be something like this. And you using data from those systems so that you could actually inform decisions that otherwise would not be possible by these individual applications. Is that the right depiction of customer intelligence data lake? Obviously, the source systems, you'll be adding to them, but this, if you could a little bit explain the approach that you've taken in applying AI.
So I have to be fair. I'm not the one that's building this. The VMware has lots of different data lakes. Like most big companies, they've got lakes upon lakes upon lakes, and lots and lots and lots of different types of systems that plug into those. In the CXS team, so the customer experience and success team, of which I'm a member of, we do have our own data lake in which we're collecting and aggregating customer data. So CRM information, ticketing information, usage data, customer sentiment, information on education, right? So who's consuming education or educational services, things of that nature. Now, the importance of the data lake, we call it a hub. So the importance of the data hub is to, again, democratize the data so that everybody can have access to it. And for me in specific, what I'm doing, and this is still an immature motion, we're just starting to kick it off, but really what we're doing is, in the customer intel side, is we're taking a look at all of the different customer data bits, in air quotes, excuse my air quotes. And so, because we want to be able to tell a story of it. So internal to VMware, I actually call it off-roading. We're four-wheeling in the data. So, and it's really, how do we look at the data through almost a kaleidoscope? So could you imagine a world in which you look at all of your detractors? What's interesting and what's fantastic about your detractors? Well, perhaps those detractors are the same 30% of the customers that fell out of step 5 in your onboarding process. Well, why did they step out of, or why did they fall out of step 5? Well, because they pushed the purple button in your product. Most companies can't tell a story like that. And that's one of the importance of customer intel, and why we need the lake is because when you look at data through a kaleidoscope, and if any of you are not familiar with a kaleidoscope, when it's a kid's toy that you look through and it shows you one thing in probably 50 or 60 different ways. And sometimes it looks distorted, sometimes it's upside down, so on and so forth. And the reason why I think that it's really important is because when you ask questions of the data that get really creative, that's when you can start to find some very impactful information about your own operating model that will help you to either get better or worse over time. Clearly, you want the former and not the latter. But if you find out that you're getting worse over time, you can find out why and put a stop to it.
Yeah. So, Carrie, let me ask you a question. Obviously, you mentioned this is an ongoing initiative. Obviously, you build a model of the customer that becomes enhanced as you bring in more data over. You continuously add and use data to score customer account health based on maybe to validate some hypotheses, identify areas that need attention. And then you provide, your output is our customer stories and insights to stakeholders, which are not just only customer organization, but could be anywhere in the company, like sales and others. Would you give some examples of customer stories that that would be shared? Would be great to know.
Yeah, so I would actually say that there's a third piece. So there's the customer health score, which is really important because that's what customer success leverages to understand, which customer they need to talk to first, who's getting better or worse over time, how are we doing overall with our customers, and that's critical for most customer success motions. But I'm creating another score within my customer intel remit, which is really about the journey score. So when you think about all of the critical engagement points that a customer has with their experience across a company, you can really start to see how that customer has struggled or not struggled, or areas in which they've struggled, and then other areas where they've had a really great, a really great run. And we want to be able to look at the journey itself at a high level. So a lot of organizations will have a figure eight or a circle. Some people have a pyramid, and that's where you start from your pre-purchase discovery phase all the way through the renewal phase. And then you've got this double click where I described earlier in the call, beg your pardon, excuse me, where you're earlier in the call, I described where you've got these critical engagement points. This is the thing that happens, right, during onboarding, as an example. You log into the product for the very first time. To be able to measure those things is then going to create a scoring mechanism for us to be able to tell whether or not our operating model is what it should be. And I think that, intrinsically, we know there's areas where there's a lot of goodness, and there's areas where we probably, there's some meat on the bone there for us to improve.
Very good. I mean, the great thing about this approach, obviously, build option, is that you have complete control over data. You decide what the faucets to turn on to pour in data. You decide actually which problem to solve. You probably need to have a team of data scientists that will be helping you build those propensity models. But in the interest of time, I would like to also share a buy option, which is perhaps more limited in the scope, but we know that each of the technologies that we use today, they're going down the path of providing sentiment analysis and applying AI and machine learning. That is certainly true by CX platforms. They would like to also be sort of a mini hub, if you will, that get data from other places, or companies like Medallia and Qualtrics are doing that, or actually also CS, or customer success platform like Gainsight and StrikeDeck. They also provide sentiment analysis that's more rigorous, if you will, than just counting, if you will, or assigning weight. Is based on, again, more advanced. When you have a large amount of data, you don't want to necessarily be reliant on counting. You would like to also use propensity models, do linear regression, other advanced techniques. Or by my company's Support Logic, we have a service experience platform that we read every ticket in a service CRM, as well as online communities and customer feedback system, and come up with customer sentiment and actionable workflow. And so similar approach our companies are taking as well. So, really there's the pros and cons, and maybe we have another session about those two options, Carrie. I wanted to just quickly go through the takeaways, and then we'd like to take some questions. You want to speak to these. You mentioned about outside in view of the customer. And I can just go through it. We already talked about aligning customer-facing teams, including involving IT, especially if you're building a data lake or data hub, and you don't own all the systems. It's important that you align the teams and also involve IT. It's not too early to invest in AI, machine learning, and natural language processing capabilities. Really, the goal is to democratize success so that no customer is left behind. But the technology has changed quite a bit. I've been tracking technology for customer success, and the last 2 or 3 years is just, it's been phenomenal. And those are, public domain algorithms are available. What is available through the products that you could actually use. And it's important that, there were earlier attempts, and many of us have done, maybe build a customer 360. And that probably would take too long, and the results would be too far out. So don't have to, you don't have to wait to have it all. Let's get started now. And obviously, customers appreciate your hard work, appreciate your efforts. When they see you're putting these effort, you get encouragement from even the customers, which is wonderful. Anything away from a takeaway before I turn it to Irene to pose some of the questions to us?
No, nothing from me. I mean, this pretty much says it all. I think the two most important things here is we're guilty of looking from the inside out. We are. So anytime you can look at your business, your motion, how you're servicing them, how you're even showing up, just even in a conversation, look at it from the inside, not from the outside in, through the lens of the customer. And I think the second thing is you don't have to wait to get started now. You don't have to have a super mature organization, or you don't have to be a big company. There are a lot of ways to get going to be able to democratize success and scale both up and down using technology, and your customers will benefit from it.
Okay, I'm going to jump in here and read a couple of questions. We're almost out of time here, so I know you guys had a lot to share. The first question is from Sama, and it's curious how much Carrie or others are investing in CS as a percentage of ARR or revenue, and how your investment mix will shift over the next year or two, given the phases that you've talked about.
Yeah, Sama, that's such an important conversation. Quite honestly, the investment is really based on that organization. I know that there's an algorithm that there are people that people have used. Personally, I've seen it done a million different ways. It is Omid. Is your cost set up right now?
Actually, we are all part of a cost of goods sold. My organization is a line of, ORG, I call it customer org, onboarding, retention, which is both customer success and support, and growth, which is account management and renewal. In terms of percentage, obviously at an early stage company, most of our effort goes into R&D, and then customer success or customer org is a second piece. In terms of percentage, I don't have really good numbers to share.
Yeah, I think it depends on how the business is set up. So as an example, if your customer success team is associated with revenue or not, right, that percentage of investment is going to be different from whether or not you're set up as a cost of goods sold, like a tech support center. It really is dependent. So I don't have a fantastic answer, Sama, for you in terms of like industry best practices, some percent, but there are algorithms out there that you can use that'll help you to arrive at that. I would say, know this, your investment in your customer in the beginning is going to be high because you're going to love all of your customers. But as you scale, you really want to try to get the amount of investment you want to, the goal is to try to decrease it in time. And that's part of why Tech Touch and scaling through digital means is really attractive to a lot of vendors.
Okay, we've got
Wonderful.
another.
Thank you, everyone. You have only 1 minute. Thank you so
Wait,
much.
well,
for
we've got
participation.
about 6 or 7 more questions. Unfortunately, we had allocated 15 minutes for
But
questions.
let's answer them.
Yes.
So for
now,
those who
you know
want
that we
to,
have a LinkedIn group. Please, perhaps you can actually direct those questions to LinkedIn, also
or
on the
to our
Slack channel.
Slack group.
Yes, please feel free to join. I would love to continue the conversation there. Also like to bring everyone's attention to next month's event. Irene, you'll be speaking, right? So can you tell us a little bit about next month talk? And it's going to be a different time, right?
Yeah, we're having our next month event on Wednesday, the 21st of April. It's going to be at noon. It's going to be a lunch and learn from noon to 1 Pacific time. So wherever you are in the world, that's going to come across in different places. And it will be, topic will be customer journeys. And Miranda Dykonsky and I are going to have a back and forth discussion around customer journeys. Should be fun.
Irene, do we have enough time? There's some really, I'm just now looking at chat.
Yeah, there are some great questions. No, we are out of time.
We're out of time.
Unfortunately, it's 6
Okay.
o'clock right now. I was trying to send you guys some clues about timing because I wanted to speed things up, but there was just a lot of material
Next
to
time.
cover.
So can I just throw this out here?
Sure.
Send your questions to Slack and I will buzz in and answer them for sure.
Perfect.
Well, thank you, Carrie. And I also want to thank our sponsors, Strike Deck and Medallia Company and the Success League. Please look them up as well, and hope to see you next time on Wednesday, the 21st of April at noon Pacific time. The topic is customer journeys with Irene Lefton and Miranda Dykonsky.
Yeah.
Yes.
So Paul, if you can place the Slack link into the chat again, that would be really helpful. I don't have it handy for people who want it. And we thank you all for participating, and will join us on Slack, and hope it was hope you enjoyed it. And Zara, let's leave the chat open until we get people have a chance to copy the Slack channel. Thank you, Paul.
Absolutely.
Thank you to Carrie and to
everyone.
Omid as well. Great
Thank you
session.
so much, everybody, for joining us this evening. I sincerely appreciate your time, and please do put your questions in Slack. I promise you I will get to them.
Use the best practices channel. Put them on the best practices channel.
That's great.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Everyone.
Take care.
Mhm.